What's up, guys? It is Tuesday, May 19th. Um, what I wanted to do was just briefly go through some examples from the IXL benchmark that you guys are going to be working on today, because personally I think it's pretty difficult, and there are some problems where you need to factor trinomials with numbers in front of the first term, so a coefficient in front of like x squared. Which, if you remember back, what we had to do was we had to use a 5-step process to factor those. All right. So again, I think it's a little complicated. All right. And I am taking a benchmark on it. I just want you to be mindful. Here are your instructions for the assignment. All right. Please watch this video if you're struggling. All right. This is going to help you. But if you look, um, if you get a 70 SMART score, that basically is 100. Okay, it's a 10 out of 10. So for example, if you get a 60 SMART score, that's going to be a 9 out of 10. And I say here, basically you're being given 30 points just for starting the assignment. All right. So just kind of know that is a 70% is 100 on this, a 70 SMART score. All right. Now let's go through some of the types of problems you're going to see. Okay. Um, Here we go. So if we're looking here, what I see is I'm dividing. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this over 1, okay? And I'm actually now going to rewrite everything as multiplication, all right? And I'm going to factor along the way too. So for example, like 4h minus 5, I can't factor that, okay? There's no greatest common factor between 4h and 5, okay? I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, so I'm putting the 1 on the top now, and the h plus 2 on the bottom. Okay, now I can't factor anything. All right, so now I'm going to try and cross cancel, and I can't do that either. Okay, there's really nothing I can do except for to now multiply across. Okay, so 4h times 1, I'm going to write my answer here. On the top, I'd be left with 4h. On the bottom, remember, we don't actually want to like FOIL two binomials. We just want to put them next to each other to represent that we're multiplying them. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say, I could even type this into 4h minus 5 in parentheses, and then h plus 2 in parentheses. And I can submit that as my answer. Okay. All right, next one. It's multiplication this time, so we don't have to do any flipping. I'm just going to right away put this over 1. Okay. And again, I'm going to look to factor. I'm going to look to factor, and I'm looking, I don't even need to rewrite this one because I'm seeing it now. 2y squared, that term cannot be factored, it's one term. Y plus 5 cannot be factored. Y and 5 don't have a greatest common factor. 3y plus 1 can't be factored, and obviously 1 cannot be factored. Can I cross cancel anything? I'm looking across. The answer here is no, again. All right, remember, if these things are in parentheses, it would literally have to say y plus 5 on the top for me to cancel this, or it would have to say 3y plus 1 on the bottom for me to cancel this. So once again, I don't really have to do much except for multiply across. All right, 2y squared, 2y, we want to hit this little button to put an exponent in, and let's remember to hit it again so we go back to normal. All right, is being multiplied by 3y plus 3y plus 1 in parentheses. And then on the bottom, y plus 5 times 1. 5 plus 5 in parentheses, that's it. Boom, answer. All right, here we go. 3q squared and 17q is being multiplied on top. This is multiplication again. Let's put this over 1. All right. Okay, so here's what we could do here. It might be easiest in this problem to multiply first. All right, so let's see, what is 3 times 17? That's going to give us 51. So here's what I'm going to be left with on the top, 51. And then I have q squared times q. That would leave me with 3q's. And this is over 16. there's a P on the bottom, and then there's 2 Q's on the bottom. Okay, so now let's simplify this. Now 51 and 16, can I simplify those numbers? Do they divide by the same thing? No, they don't, all right? But then I do have a Q to the third on the top and a Q to the second on the bottom. There are more Q's on top by 1. So I'm actually going to get rid of this Q to the second on the bottom completely, and I'm just going to change this to 1 Q on the top, all right? So my answer would be on the top 51 Q, and on the bottom 16 B. Okay. All right. Let's do another one. Getting a little more complicated here. It's division. Put it over 1. A lot of these are similar, where we put it over 1 right away. And remember, I'm going to factor right away. So this time I can factor something, okay? If I'm looking at the top left here, I can take out a y. All right, they have a greatest common factor of y. Remember, I'm dividing by that. What's left inside the parentheses would be y plus 3. Okay, on the bottom, 3y plus 4, there's no greatest common factor. I'm just rewriting it. Put it in parentheses. We're flipping this, right? So multiplying by 1 is on the top now. 5y plus 3, there's no greatest common factor. All right, now I look, I factored everything, right? Now I look, can I cross cancel anything? Remember, it has to say y plus 3 exactly on the bottom, and it doesn't here, and it doesn't here. Okay, so I technically here cannot simplify or cross cancel anything. All right, so once again, I just kind of multiply across. So my answer on top would be y, and then y plus 3 inside of parentheses, and on the bottom, I'm just putting these two expressions inside of parentheses next to each other. So 3y plus 4 and 5y plus 3, and boom. All right. I think we kind of get the point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip to one where it is what I wanted to talk about, which is right here. All right, here we go. So here's why I wanted to make this video in the first place, is I went in here and I started doing some of the problems, and I saw something like this trinomial, and I got worried that you guys might not remember how to do this, how to factor something like this. Okay, because what I see something in front of the first term, it has a coefficient. All right, when we factored something like that, we had to go through a 5-step process. Okay, so I want to review that process right now. All right, so that's what I'm going to do over here, because what I'm looking at right now is 3q plus 4 can't be factored. 4q minus 3 can't be factored. This can be factored, though, using the 5-step process. Here is what we did for that process. We multiplied these two numbers together, a times c, if you remember, to get the new number on the top that we wanted to be able to multiply to with our factors, which would be negative 144 if I multiplied 12 by negative 12, right? Now remember, this number in the middle is still our bottom number that we're trying to add to as well at the same time. So simultaneously, what two numbers multiply to negative 144 and add to 7? So now we have to do some math and try and figure this out. Okay? So I did some math, and it turns out that the factors are 16 and 9. Okay? So now it has to add to a positive 7, remember? It has to add to a positive 7. That means that the number with the higher absolute value, which is 16, has to be positive, and the one with the lower absolute value has to be negative. Again, why? Because it adds to a positive 7, not a negative 7, and it multiplies to a negative number. Okay, so they have to have opposite signs. All right? So here's what we do with this. Here's what we do with this to factor this. Okay, it's a lot of work. So again, what I did earlier is I was writing this down on paper. I would suggest doing that same thing. All right, get a piece of paper or notebook out and do this. All right, when it comes to complicated problems. Here's what we do. We rewrite this trinomial, but we replace 7q with 16q and negative 9q. All right, so the 12q squared, I rewrite it. Okay, now I also talked about doing this, like strategically placing things, placing factors with specific terms. Here it doesn't really matter because 16 and 9, they both go into 12, and both of the numbers, both of the terms are 12 anyway. So I'm just going to say plus 16q and minus 9q minus 12. All right. So again, all I've done is I replaced 7q with its factors that we found. All right. Now I do something called factoring by grouping. I group the first two terms together and the final two terms together, and I factor out their greatest common factors. Okay? 12q squared and 16q would have a greatest common factor of 12 and 16 would have a greatest common factor of 4. And then they both also have at least one q, so we could take a q out as well. This would leave me with 3q plus 4. Okay? Now remember, my goal is to get this to say the same thing by factoring something specific out. How could I get this to become 3q plus 4? I could take out a negative 3. If I divide everything by negative 3, I'm once again left with 3q plus 4. Okay, now the final step was we took what we factored out and grouped it together in the end. And then my other binomial, my common binomial, is my other binomial. All right, so I know this is a pain, but that was just part of the problem. That was simply factoring this trinomial so that I can now simplify. All right, so I wanted to show you a problem like this specifically because to figure this out, to simplify this, you are going to have to be able to factor something with a number in front of the first term using that 5-step process. All right, so let's remember our binomials. Okay, 4q minus 3, 3q plus 4. Let's get rid of all this. And now let's simplify this. All right, so going back to the original problem, I had a 3q plus 4 on the top, 4q minus 3 on the bottom. I was dividing. I'm going to flip that, put a 1 over the top, and put these two expressions next to each other on the bottom. All right, so hopefully this makes sense. I changed this trinomial to these two binomials using that 5-step process. Okay, so let's get rid of this. Now my work is here. All right, now I'm cross-canceling. Finally, cross-canceling. So I see a 3q plus 4 here. Matches with this 3q plus 4 on the bottom. They cancel, right? Now see this? Common mistake. Some students will say, oh, I see a 4q minus 3 here and here, so I could cancel that as well. Incorrect, because they're both in the denominator, all right? This would have to be up here for me to be able to cancel it, all right? So I can't do anything else. That's it. I can cancel these. That's it. So what am I left with? I'm left with a 1 on the top. So here's my answer, finally. 1 on the top, and then 4q minus 3 right next to the other 4q minus 3. Q minus 3 next to 4. 3. Let's make sure our work is right. Okay, and let's submit this, and boom. All right. So hopefully that made sense. As you can see, if we look at this problem, here's another one where we have another trinomial with a number in front of that first term. Okay. So if you guys have questions, please ask in my email or in the discussion thread. Otherwise, I would really just try and watch that example I just did numerous times, or kind of go back into your notes from chapter 7. We talked about it multiple times there to see if you can try and remember how to factor using that 5-step process for special problems like the one we just did. Okay. But again, hopefully that made sense. Please email me if you have questions. Please ask in the discussion thread. But do your best, guys. Remember, 70 SMART score is really 100 on this assignment. All right. So do your best, and I'll talk to you guys later.